Paul G. Simeon, PhD, states that there are no clinical diagnostic criteria for social media addiction. But if an individual excessively or compulsively uses social media platforms as a way to improve their mood, that is a key symptom of addiction, which may suggest dependency. The most important thing to keep in mind is the cost of any behavior that continues despite persistently negative consequences to functioning. This is a cornerstone for any definition of addiction. Negative consequences to functioning. Would watching video after video, day in and day out, playlist by playlist, scroll by scroll, unable to detach from the pretty rich and perfect people telling me about their pretty rich and perfect lives at the detriment of my own self-image and self-stress, count as negative consequences to function? I was on YouTube, scrolling as usual, when I decided to stop and watch a video by a blogger I like. What was supposed to be a fun way to kill 30 minutes quickly became the thief of all joy: comparison. She was getting married, and there was just no way for me to not see all of the points in the video. She had this loving relationship, passive income, and enough of it to fund her huge new house, custom-made wedding dress, and destination wedding abroad, glowing skin, and time to work out every day. Meanwhile, I had been crumbling under the self-imposed stress of trying to perform at my job, improve my art off the clock, get freelance work to supplement my budget, maintain my relationships across the country, work on relaunching my Etsy, write a book, plan for travel, and now I was thinking of throwing dating back into the mix too. My life had become too much on its own, but especially when I didn't have the mental space to decide what I cared about and wanted on my own. A financial guru told me in their How to Make $5,000 in a Day video that an email list was absolutely required, then I would have an email list by noon. If a beautiful teenager told me that X product was the secret to glass skin, then it would be in my cart by 2. I wasn't sure if I was happily interested in something, so I looked it up, or if I looked something up, saw other people being happy with it, and that made me interested in it. It was time for a change. I started small and made myself set my phone down for 2 hours a day. Just 2 out of the 16 that I'm awake. It was daunting, but actually quite easy. The issue came when I installed a Lock Me Out app and set it to make me take a 30-minute break from my phone after every 6 hours of consistent social media usage. But the workday was 8 hours. And weekends. I've got to be able to have fun on weekends. What would I do with the time? The day would run away from me and I wouldn't have any fun. I would connect with no one. I would do nothing. I would learn nothing. Start 0 $5,000 a day businesses with my email lists. After some mental debate, I upped it to 8 hours. Surely that was a reasonable amount. I mean, there was no way I could go 8 straight hours on Oh, the app locked me out. What had I been doing for 8 hours? There was no way I was scrolling for 8 whole hours. I mean, my friends came over, and I don't get on the phone when my friends are over, at least not that much anyway, so how in the 12 hours since waking up could I have possibly spent 8 of them scrolling? That day made me decide very abruptly to just let it go altogether. I got through the rest of the weekend and then announced that I would be off social media for the next 7 days. Goodbye, see you later. My biggest worry was getting through the work week without social media. My rules were simple. No YouTube, except to listen to music, no Instagram at all, and only 2 hours at first of TV time after work. Nothing similar, like just watching YouTube re-uploads on Vimeo, and I didn't have any other social media platforms at the time, so obviously I would not be adding them to my repertoire then. My phone would just become an extension of me rather than all of me. But again, work. It was 8 hours of repetitive tasks and about 1.5 hours of driving to and fro. How could I get through it all with no entertainment, without learning about one of my interests? What would I do on my lunch break? There were times all throughout this challenge where I felt bored. It could be agonizing just sitting there doing what felt like nothing, when I could be learning. Most of what I watched were videos on finance, spirituality, self-improvement, art and design, aka my job, and the like. I would save my vlogs and silly gaming videos for when I was at home chilling after work. Since most of my media felt productive, what did stepping away from it really accomplish? But I stuck to my goal. When I was home, this became about filling my time with other things. Writing, yoga, journaling, and reading became some of my favorites. I'm about halfway through Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen, and I've been enjoying it, although I don't like how all of her characters have larger-than-life names like Elizabeth Lyme and Zoe Hennessy. Please. But when I'm at work, my boredom becomes about focusing on my work or talking to my coworkers. Now, to all the CEOs listening, focusing on my work didn't actually get it completed any better or any worse. I was pretty efficient either way, but it was nice to just have some quiet in my mind. I haven't been able to latch on to meditating because I'm always thinking about or hearing something, but just working silently is something I've been comfortable settling into. And rekindling relationships with my coworkers that had been cut off by hours and hours of YouTube podcasts was nice. Maybe I don't know what design colors are in right now, but it hasn't stopped me from making good designs and enjoying my days. Not having a phone certainly is more boring, but not as boring as missing one of my weekly uploads. I upload every single Saturday, so if you are enjoying this video so far, maybe leave a subscribe, click the like, and leave a comment letting us know how it went last time you did a social media purge, or what is stopping you from finally taking the plunge. So yeah, not having the phone can be a drag, but being bored for 20 minutes while I get into the pace of work or think of something to start a conversation about isn't as much the end of the world as I thought it would be. Finally came the issue of my friends. As I said, I have a rule that I don't like to pull my phone out when I'm around my friends. The only problem with this rule is I'm the only one that has it. So more often than not, after a couple of seconds of staring at their foreheads as they look down at their screens, I can't think of anything to say and end up pulling out my phone as well. With this challenge, I found that I had to push myself a little bit harder to try and come up with something to say, and I couldn't fully bridge the gap between my friends being on socials and me not, but what's a little silence? Again, it never killed me, and it just meant that whenever I did come up with something, it was more immediate because I was thinking about what I was going to say to my friends instead of the video that I had just watched. Maybe someday I'll drag all my friends to a cabin, confiscate their phones, and see what we get up to for a weekend. On day 2, I really didn't feel like listening to music on the ride home. How much of the same 20 songs could I really be expected to withstand? So I decided to watch podcasts. If it truly wasn't linked to YouTube in any way, I figured just one episode would be a break from Unbreak My Heart. I listened to an episode of Girl Boss where she discussed starting an email list. And by the time I pulled into my driveway, I was trying to figure out what my business was so I could figure out what kind of product I could make to get them to sign up for my email list. I mean, I like YouTube, but it hasn't really taken off and seemingly won't. There's Etsy, but who's my target audience on there? I mean, anyone who will buy my art, really, but maybe I should niche down just for the sake of it? What can I call? What should I offer them? You know, I have wanted to write a guide on transitioning from high school to college. Maybe that can be a free ebook, and people who want to read it have to sign up for the email list first, and they can learn all about... Wait. I had to stop myself. I was doing it again. After one podcast episode, I was trying to rewrite my goals to match a life that I didn't even want. If I have to sit there and fabricate a business just to make an email list for it, is the email list really worth it? I went inside and felt defeated. As defeated as usual. My life would never be theirs. My businesses, no matter how passionate I was, would never take off. I would never have financial freedom. I would never be successful. History had shown me that the Girl Boss podcast email marketing couldn't even save me from myself. And so the next day in the car, I still felt crushed about my non-existent email list. I thought maybe I could listen to a podcast that doesn't have anything to do with my life, like true crime. People like true crime, and they don't usually listen to it because they plan on committing crimes, right? But the thing is that I don't like true crime, and I couldn't think of anything that I liked that had nothing to do with my life. Did I like anything that the media hadn't capitalized on? That I myself hadn't fed into the capitalization of? I thought maybe instead I would listen to psychologists on how to deal with feelings of inadequacy and failure. Maybe that would help me overcome the Girl Boss podcast. But the therapist speaking in this paper did the thing that my first therapist in college did, where they treat you like a toddler with an ouchie. The overly nice attitude was kind of freaking me out. So I decided to turn it off and just listen on my own. I could solve my own problems. No one had to tell me the answer. So I drove in silence and thought about it and talked to myself about it and eventually discovered my truth. I quickly crossed podcasts off my list of acceptable allowances for my media-free week because I realized the hard way that I am too impressionable. Social media and constantly having someone tell me something in my Bluetooth headphones every second of every day has left me without any will or way of my own. I was curious to see what I would want or who I would be without social media. And spoiler, the answer is a less stressed and more happy person who reads more, but even just an hour back on the horse put me back at square one. I've learned lots of valuable information from social media, but honestly more information than I could ever apply to my own life anyway. It's far too much information that doesn't match where I am, where I'm headed, what I want, or how I feel. All my learning took place on platforms with people who had no credentials and most likely just wanted to sell me something. Learning about the world through camouflaged ads and comparisons is not a healthy way. Although it was quite simple, I was strangely proud of myself for solving my problem on my own and not actually leaning on anyone to relate to for once. And subsequent days of dealing with boredom without turning to someone telling me what to do next were peaceful and lovely. The thing about only allowing myself 1 hour of TV is that most of my time is spent in silence. Originally, my plan was to have 2 hours of TV time, as that was half of the time that I spent at home after work. But I kept getting up to do other things, ended up messing up my timing, and stayed watching TV way too long the first day. So I decided 1 hour was much easier because it was basically 2 episodes of any show I wanted. It kind of made me feel like I was a toddler getting my tablet time, but it actually really helped. Once my time was up, I had no choice but to do yoga or take a shower or read or something before bed. And since I was out of media time, my hour or two at home after work were quiet. My drives home when I wouldn't want to listen to music was quiet. When I would read or write was quiet. Everything was quiet. At first I disliked the quiet. It was boring and I was worried I'd think too much for my own mental health's good. But a lot of the start of this experiment was just adjusting my brain to what was happening. Going from constant media overload to nearly nothing overnight was a big change. It was going to come with some growing pains, but there's a science to the quiet. Choice overload, or overchoice, is a cognitive impairment that occurs during a decision-making process when we are presented with too many options we cannot easily choose between. Our ability to make a good decision is reduced by the overload of choices, as is our satisfaction with the final decision. When you can write your dissertation, watch the latest Euphoria episode, and catch up with your girl on FaceTime all at once, you might choose to do them all poorly or get overwhelmed by your choices and end up doing nothing. I experienced the opposite in my week of limited media. I thought it'd be a strain at first, but I find I don't particularly miss the sensual overload. Just doing one thing at a time makes life feel a lot gentler. It's just me and my task. Time flies because I'm not so worried about losing it. Somehow, doing less always feels like more, and instead of getting glued to a video or planning an email campaign, I get to spend a night drawing, and then writing, and then reading. I'm finally going to bed fulfilled, and feeling like I did the best I could with my time allowed me to go to bed each night with a smile, instead of staying up another 30 minutes, and then another, and another, to catch up on the silence that I didn't know I had missed. I still struggled with insomnia in this time. Laying down at 10:30 and falling asleep at 10:30 are two very different things. But for now, simply feeling better about my day is all I can hope for. As I reflect on this experience, I see that just 1 week of limited media seems to have greatly improved my quality of life. I was hoping I would hate it and would come to you with a list of cons, but in general I liked it. On the weekend I went to explore, since sitting in the house was too boring, and I got to see more of LA. City I love. I haven't done that in a long time, honestly. The weeks away felt too stressful and far too expensive for me to exit the house and do anything other than just lay down and watch my videos. But getting out again was marvelous. I saw my friends, I spoke to my coworkers, I read a book that had been collecting dust on my shelf, I got more done with less stress, found some new music, and generally enjoyed myself this week. But I worry about the cons of this and what they'll bring moving forward. For starters, I miss learning from my videos. I'm not sure that reading a 2022 version of Rich Dad, Poor Dad would even make me feel any different than watching a video of the same content. Maybe it's my own relationship with my life and my failures that needs adjusting, not whether or not I keep up with my drawing techniques. But what do I do when I watch the next wedding vlog or listen to the next Girl Boss podcast episode? How can I keep myself from emotionally falling apart? How can I control my reaction to these things? There's also boredom. Now I've had no choice but to accept it, but what about next week when I'm back to the media lifestyle? What is there to stop me from opening Instagram and Reels and scrolling pasta videos for 2 hours? How can I hold myself back and accept boredom and silence more openly? And finally, communication. Most everyone I talk to talks to me on Instagram. If they share a reel or 10, am I to just not watch them? Won't they feel disconnected from me if I take a week off every so often? How can I have enough self-constraint to open the app, respond to my DM, and then close it without scrolling even once? How do I go about striking a better balance? Well, I don't know yet. This is all trial and error, but for now I'm going to try only doing one thing at a time, enjoying the silence, sticking to my hour of screen time on weekdays, lowering my lockdown timer from 8 hours to just 4, and accept that a break every 4 hours, so I've discovered, won't kill me. During this week, I brought my average daily screen time down from 10 hours and 20 minutes to 6 hours and 24 minutes. I unlocked my device an average of 29 times a day, down from 36, and on any particular day I only spent around 3 hours on YouTube listening to music, way down from my 8 hours listening to the reasons why I am an inadequate person. I've relearned that I can figure things out on my own and don't need a yoga flow to follow or a tutorial before I make the dinner I've already made 5 times. I can think on my own and come up with pretty decent solutions when I let myself. No one can relate to me or have a solution for me, and that's just fine. I've learned watching a show or movie on a streaming service or reading a book does not at all feel the same as watching videos or reels. It's less connected to life, kind of like a true crime podcast. You escape into an entirely different world that can entertain you, and then when you're done, you settle it down. You feel the enjoyment of that world but are snapped back into reality all the same. With YouTube or content that seeks to entertain via relatability or teach, there's no way to detach what you're watching from your own life. There's no way to know if you wanted to knit a hat or if you saw that girl knitting a hat and thought, there's no way you can be as pretty as her if you don't knit that hat. I learned I like the separation and will work on finding more shows to watch and more books to grab. I don't want to give up on social media altogether. There's a reason I liked it, but I think much less of it would serve me well. Finding that balance and maintaining self-control is going to be a difficult labor of love, but something I've got to at least trust myself to try. Paul G. Simone, PhD, states that there is no clinical diagnostic criteria for social media addiction. The most important thing to keep in mind is any behavior that continues despite persistently negative consequences to functioning. I wouldn't call myself clinically addicted, but taking a step back has forced me to clearly see the negative consequences to my functioning that all this learning I thought I was doing had caused me. I encourage you to install a lockout app or throw your phone in a drawer for a week and see what negative consequences you notice. I hope to use my findings to better tailor my content to serve my audience instead of stress it out. If you like the sound of that, please leave a subscribe, give us a like, and again, comment and let us know when you're going to start your social media purge. I will see you guys all next time, which will most likely be next Saturday for my weekly upload. And until then, toodaloo. Thanks for watching.